Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Writers Guild of Canada presents Writers Talking TV. My name is Richard Young. I'm the screenwriter. Some things I've done is I've worked on 16 Hudson, as well as on the show Miss Persona. Also, I co-created the South Asian comedy series Kandu Attitude, which was a Writers Guild of Canada Diversity Script of the Month selection, as well as the JFL pitch finalist. So today, we are going to be talking about Jann, the hit CTV series that just finished its second season, has been renewed for a third season, and is going to be available in the US on Hulu in the coming months. So this show is quite unlike anything that's being seen on Canadian TV right now, and it revolves around the real Canadian music icon Jann Arden, who plays a fictionalized, heightened version of herself. I hope it's fictionalized. So as we're talking with these two fantastic people for Jann, we're going to be talking with the co-creator Leah Gauthier, as well as the co-creator and showrunner Jennica Harper. We aren't able to speak with executive story editor Leah Handa. She was supposed to be attending with us, but because she is so amazing and so busy, she's actually on set as we speak. So that's all we got. Let's jump into the chat. All right, but let's take us to the beginning. Let's start with the genesis of the show. So let's talk with Leah here. So Leah, in terms of what we're talking about here is that, Leah, I'd love for you to just kind of briefly go on that you're working with Jann. How do you get this idea of like, hey, we should work on a TV series, to then getting to the steps where then you actually decide, hey, let's talk to Jennica. Jenica's amazing. Let's have a conversation with her.
True. How did we get here? You mentioned that there was like some newer writers maybe potentially joining us, which is great because maybe I can speak sort of to them because my journey to this point was vastly different from a lot of people. I did work in TV for a while before I got into scripted, but it was reality and factual TV. So that's like not a normal jump to make by any means. Like when I was in reality, I didn't hear of a lot of people like jumping over to scripted. But it was definitely something I was very much interested in doing. And I think I developed a storytelling through reality and factual television that helped me a lot. But I knew Jann also throughout those 10 years. I sort of worked with her on and off. And we had many conversations about, because I was in the reality world, about potentially doing a reality show with her. And we had all these different variations of what that could look like, but nothing ever sort of felt right. Nothing really went very far. And then I approached her with this idea of a scripted series sort of loosely based on her. And she was like, at that time in her life, ready to do something like that. Because it's very scary. I think she was just like, she's really come into this attitude of like, I'm just going to do me, which is like very inspiring. So we sat down at her kitchen table and sort of wrote off like a pitch, a one-page pitch. And then I made the decision not to sort of bring it to production companies in Vancouver because I was somewhat known as like a reality TV person. Like I decided to go to Toronto and meet with people there that just didn't, see me as this one thing, which I also think was probably part of the reason this was a success. And then Project 10 took it to networks with me. And it was then that we got to meet Jennica, who was like, amazing. And we immediately knew we needed her to be in charge of us.
Okay. All right. So
that's how that went.
No. So let's dig a bit into this genesis here. Is that in terms of like, you're working with Jann here and you're kind of going through the various iterations of what this could be. So maybe you could talk about what are some of the initial ideas and why is it that it came back to like, let's just do a version of Jann. And why do you think that kind of resonated with you before you decide to walk in with Project 10? Or did Project 10 tell you, hey, what about this idea? So what is it that kind of, basically what I'm asking is that, especially when it comes to these writers, when you're trying to create your own ideas, is how do you kind of center where that idea is coming from?
Right.
And how do you kind of double check, hopefully being like, does this feel at my gut that this actually has like a real life that we could actually work something with?
It definitely changed a lot. Initially, it was much crazier. Like Jann, drove a Lamborghini through a gas station and had a pet tiger. And she was just this like off the wall version of herself. And if I think about it now, it was probably because there's a comfort, like for a woman that hasn't done a lot of acting like this, there's a comfort in playing this like hugely different version of yourself. It's much scarier to play a character that has parts of you in it. Mm-hmm. So when we had that written down, it was like, that's funny, but is that sustainable? Like, is that funny for a minute? Do we care what happens to her and her tiger. Probably not. We're going to need her to be a real person with a life and a family and struggles. And so Jennica helped with that too, to sort of like make it more realistic. And then over time, I think Jann became more comfortable with that also. Because initially we didn't even call her Jann Arden. We called her Jann something else.
Nelson,
I forgot. It was like, yeah, she had a different last name because that was like, that was safety too. And we had to say, you know, I think the best choice is to be Jann Arden, and we will help you. You will be a dick sometimes, but like, you're going to be likable. We promise you, we hope. That, yeah. So you do have to like, whatever your idea is initially, it probably will change 50 times. But, you know, as long as the core of it still feels right to you and feels like you're making something that it matters to you, I feel like you should be able to adapt to some of the feedback from people that maybe know more.
Okay.
The end.
So then, Leah, let's ask you then, if you can articulate, if you can't, we can come back to this after, is when you're talking about that core. So we're not saying this is a core for every show, but what do you think, like, coming through from the initial iteration to what is now, could you articulate that core at all?
The core of her character or the core of the series?
The core of the series, yeah.
I feel like initially a lot of the conversation was around the music industry and like, isn't that interesting? Won't that be so interesting for people to watch that? And there are parts of it that are interesting, but a lot of it isn't. And I think the thing that people like the most and the core of the show is the family. And we get the most positive response from episodes and scenes that involve the whole family. They all went camping this season, and everyone was really loving that episode. I think it was like having all of those individuals together and being just regular people is sort of the core. She's like a regular person. And I think that's the core of our show.
Cool. All right, so that's great. So taking this core and developing here with Project 10. So let's talk about how then you then were connected with Jennica and what Jennica then brought to this to the show and helped it evolve.
Oh my God. I mean, what hasn't she brought? How much time do you have? we met with a bunch of different folks, and initially we spoke with Jennica on the phone, and she was just ridiculously prepared, which is just lovely. Like, if you want a job, it'd be great if you like looked into who was like hiring you and what kind of a show it was. And so she had read all of the material that we provided. She had come up with other ideas. She immediately was like, can Sarah McLachlan be her nemesis? Can they hate each other and perpetually fight throughout these seasons? She just was very prepared and, you know, said the kind of buzzwords that we were looking for, like collaborative and all this kind of stuff, like team player. She was just so great that we then Jann flew here so that we could all go out for dinner together. And it just felt right. There was just a connection between the three of us immediately. So we knew right away that we were going to hire her for sure.
All right, now let's hear it from Jenica's perspective here.
Let's.
So especially as the you know, because we see.
I don't know what happened. How do I get out? I don't know what's happening. No. From my I've told this part of the story before, but from my perspective, I think the reason that our initial phone interview and stuff went well was, first of all, I was prepared. Of course, I was sort of like, I want to bring something to the table here, but I also, and I also thought this is a no-brainer story and world and character. I was like, this is going to be a show. I really felt like it was, because I think the core of it was so fun and exciting, and this person who is, you know, very well known and really known as a singer songwriter, but also known for being very funny. Like, there's a reason why she's asked to host things. There's a reason why she's, you know, people love her live shows, because she's very funny in concert. And I just thought this is going to work. Like, this is going to actually work. So I prepared and thought, I'm going to like play in this world with them for a while. But I also truly believed I was not going to get the job. And I thought, this is really cool that they, you know, that I'm among this mix of people, you know, being considered. And I thought that was awesome. I had met Ben Murray from Project 10 at Banff, actually, at the Banff Media Festival. So that was I just realized kind of recently just how wonderful having gone that year was. That was how I met Ben, and then he sort of put me in the mix, I think, for this for consideration. Anyway,
So Jennica, so before you jump in, why did you think you weren't going to get it?
I thought I wasn't going to get it because I thought this show would hire somebody who had many years of show running experience already. So
Okay.
I didn't think that this would be a show that would hire a first-time showrunner. And
we're huge fans of hiring people that have never done it before. That's our whole vibe. You've never done it before, you're hired.
You're in. So I think that the benefit of not knowing, it's like there's this thing about gambling where if you need to win, you won't win, but if you don't need it, you can play properly, kind of thing. You could actually, make the smart moves. And I think that's sort of what happened, is that I did not really think that I was a strong contender for the role. So I just wanted to enjoy meeting these people and have some fun talking about the story. And that kind of extended into our in-person dinner. We went out for dinner and chatted, and we just had a really fun time. I had a lot of laughs, and it was really comfortable, but I was extra comfortable because I didn't think I was gonna, I didn't think I needed to worry about it.
She had the swagger of a woman who had nothing to lose.
It can be helpful. It can be helpful to just take that pressure off your plate and, don't worry about it. Just be in the moment. If you can fool yourself into thinking you're just being in the moment, I highly recommend it.
Okay.
That was sort of the story right there.
So let's go back to Leah here. So, you have this great dinner, you have this great connection. Leah, you're like, I think this is the one. Mm-hmm. You do it together, you get together, and you start putting together the stuff. So we're going to talk, of course, to Jenica's perspective in terms of like being a showrunner and how you're building the room and that sort of thing. Now, Leah, you talked about how you didn't have a lot of like direct experience with writing and that sort of thing. So what were the kind of like learnings at this point in terms of those initial steps of like, sure, okay, we've brought in Jenica's now the showrunner. What are things that you're realizing that you are like, hey, this is actually some translatable skills I can adapt versus, oh, I need to ramp up this really quickly because I didn't realize this is something I need to be doing.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I mean, both those things happened. I did realize that there were some things that transferred in terms of, I mean, in reality TV, each episode you're telling a story. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. There has to be a story to tell. There has to be something that happens and worth waiting to see how it ends. So I feel like I developed those skills there, but there was definitely the learning curve was huge. If I knew beforehand, I probably would not have showed up like that. It was like almost a blessing that I was a bit naive about it. And because I had Jennica to help me, and not in a way that was like, listen here, idiot. Let me shine a light on all the things you don't know. Like, she was like, this is how this works. This is how this works. And she was really patient with people. And she's also like, I was overwhelmed even with the software. The writing software was like a thing that I had to immediately learn how to figure out. And I'm still learning how to figure out. And Jennica is very chill about like, it's not the punctuation in this that's matters to me. It is the idea. Like, you're coming with the ideas and the jokes. I'm like, that's what we're all here for. She creates a comfortable space. I think it's super important that people feel comfortable to be creative. I don't know if anyone's ever been creative out of fear. It's just like not a vibe I've ever heard of. So the learning curve was huge, but Jennica is incredibly helpful and a great teacher. And that was one of the things that I think you can see in her immediately. Like, she's like really, so basically everyone that has material that you need Jennica to read, go ahead and send it to her in her DMs.
I'm pretty sure I owe script reads to about 6 people on this list already. Thank God I actually read Richard's like on time.
There we go. Yeah, so Jennica, let's go to you here. Like, so what happens here is that as so they bring you in, you're going to be the showrunner, and it's great that we're talking about how giving you are, how great teacher are. We'll get to the brass tacks of that in a moment. But so when you're here, for you as a showrunner the first time, what is the first things you're starting about? What are the first things you're looking at? Are you looking at what's the idea? How do we finesse it? Are you looking at like, okay, we have this budget, so it's really just going to be this many episodes? Like, what are the first things you're thinking of? Going from there all the way to like, okay, building the room and then trying to get those stories out?
I think the very first thing I was thinking about up front was, so Leah and I want to be really clear. I speak for her sometimes, by the way. We finish each other's sandwiches.
Sandwiches.
Well, we both very much understand that we are co-creators on a show that has, a Canadian celebrity, and there's a reason why this show really had a shot at being picked up. We know that our feeling, I think, was this show could potentially get, it was sort of ours to lose. It was kind of like Jann was going to draw some people to the show because people love Jann. There was, there's practically enough of a crowd of just people who love Jann and her music to at least come and check out the show. Our job was to make sure that we were going to write and make a good enough show that people will stick around and that we could keep going. And also, I think that we, created a show that was worthy of her. That was really a big part of it for us too. So the first thing I was really thinking was about story, and it was about how to make sure the premise was something that was going to really be fun for this character that is a very fictionalized version of Jann. It's very, we take some details and then we pushed everything else into this wildly narcissistic, doesn't just totally self-minded kind of thing. And then, populate her world with different kinds of pressure points, that her family has certain pressure points, and then her career has certain pressure points. And every episode, if you actually look at every episode, maybe the camping one is its own thing, but every episode is usually like a push-pull between I want to be a big name in my career again, and something in my personal life, whether it's family or, the person I'm in love with. Those things are sort of pulling at her. So we really looked at the story to try to make sure we were, it was my first focus, was to try not to screw it up, to make sure that we were creating a sort of scenario for her that was going to be ripe for comedy, but also, because of our personal interests, have a kind of some serialization and some heartfelt, dramatic moments. That was important to us. That tone was sort of part of the, as soon as I came on board and we started developing it, that tone was there from the beginning. We were trying to have this balance between those tones, which wasn't an easy sort of, line to walk, but those were the things that were first and foremost, were developing the world and trying to create a world that we could play in for years to come, hopefully.
Could I just take a little, put a pin right here, is especially with this particular show, it's like I said, talking about yours to lose, is that especially because you have Jann coming in, you could be pushing it into a, the stereotypical direction, very broad comedy, very much tied to like her stardom, but having a type of show which is so unique in terms of like switching from comedy to drama, sometimes just whip pan into that, and then also too the combination of family drama with actually star drama. Did you find that came not just naturally, but then also when you were pitching it to producers and people getting on board, were people getting on board with that, or did you have to really protect that? Because having a show that has those dramedy elements, sometimes that can be a tough sell depending on who you're selling it to, or maybe it was easy. Like, did you find any sort of difficulty in balancing both the stardom, the family, or the comedy and the drama, or did it all just come really naturally and you didn't get any pushback from people?
It's a bit difficult initially, I think, because we did receive a lot of feedback about tone, because I think it was a bit confusing to have laughter and crying within seconds of each other in a comedy. So tone was brought up a lot. But if you are a Jann Arden fan, you can go to her concert and be doing the same thing. You're crying and laughing at the same time. She is very much a stand-up comedian in her shows, and then she writes songs that you just, your guts are just crying out. So it felt
on
right.
Brand.
It's on brand for her. And so that was like, she was very much like, this is the show I want to make also. Like, if her mother has gone through memory loss and passed, and she's like, if you're not laughing, you're losing your mind. So I need to make light of certain things that are heavy, but I also need to feel the stuff that sucks. So I'm going to do this show. I'm not going to make fun of old people losing their minds. Like it's going to be like a serious topic, and we're going to have both sides of it. So I think we fought for it a bit initially at the beginning.
Yeah, I would say so. I think it was a bit of an act of faith of CTV to sort of trust that this was going to work. I don't think it's that conventional. I mean, we were sort of suggesting it's, I would not say it's so far as to be sort of a more cable show than network show, but I do think it's, cable aspiring in a way. And that's including the look and how we shoot the show. It's very much it's got that sort of more filmic look as you sort of come through scenes and move through scenes, as opposed to sort of shoulder, 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 shoulder. I think it was a bigger conversation up front. As soon as it became clear that we were exploring Jann's relationship with her mom and her mom's memory loss journey, which honestly is kind of at the heart of the most dramatic parts of the story. And when we were exploring that, as well as some actual real stuff about aging and what you're going to make of the rest of your life, and sort of like what a woman in her, I mean, we joke all the time, we're like, a woman in my early 40s, and it's like she's not a woman in her early 40s, but we talk all the time about that sort of, she kind of wants back what she once had, but actually looking around at what she has right now is kind of the end goal. We're sort of thinking that that's where this character ultimately will want her to end up. We like her ambitious, but ambitious because she has songs she wants to sing and to share with the world, as opposed to, I want to be on a magazine cover, that kind of thing. So I think once it became clear that the family was really going to be baked into the heart of the show, I think that was exciting for Belle as well. And that it started to seem like there was more to it and more layers to the show than a silly show about a woman running away from cops in a field kind of thing, which we also do and we love. But the fact that it has layers, I think, is what's now going to give it legs. And so I'm very grateful that that's what we've kind of built.
Okay, cool. So here you are now, you two here, is that you've now started to like really finesse, like really what that idea is going to be, what the story is, the tone, et cetera, et cetera. Now what's like the next step of what after you've really kind of like solidified, this is what we envision Jann the series to be?
Yeah, at that point we did start, and that was also in conversation for sure with our producers and Jann is part of this conversation the whole time. And sharing her comfort level and stuff like that. Leah and I always wanted it to be that her name, it was Jann Arden. It was about a fictionalized Jann Arden. And we did sort of just wait patiently for her to feel comfortable enough with what we were doing to get there. And then she got there. It was awesome. I'm very grateful that it's really her name. And at that point we started, we built our writing room. So I guess you're talking once we got picked up.
Yeah.
So we got picked up based on essentially a pilot script and a Bible, and a lot changed even from that Bible. But we started looking for writers, and I will say one of the toughest things, and I will say this knowing that it's both positive and negative, one of the toughest things I found about reading a lot of writers for a potential writing room was realizing just how many strong comedy writers in Canada there are, and not enough of them are working on comedies. We're very aware, and we don't have a lot of spots in our rooms. It's a pretty small room, and it runs so short too, because we sort of have a short production schedule. But it was actually sort of shocking to realize how many Canadian writers were writing really good comedy scripts, and that there was going to be room to hire very few of them. So that was something that I just wanted to flag, that sort of like, if you're a comedy writer in Canada and struggling to get into a comedy room, it's a numbers problem. It's a problem if there aren't enough comedy rooms in the country. So that is what it is. That's something we can obviously all try to shift, and we can all be out there pitching our comedies, but it's not necessarily an indication that you don't have the goods. because we read a lot of really good comedy scripts. So we started reading, and then we started talking to people and phone interviews and having meetings. And I don't know if I could say with sort of like exactly sort of like we're looking for someone who does this and someone who does this and someone who does this. It was a lot more looking for people who had an energy that they were bringing to the table that, you know, I appreciate that Leah says I'm really collaborative. That is something that I really aspire to in our rooms. So we really wanted that feeling of that it was going to be about building something together, and that we were not really looking for funny people who wanted to hold court and tell jokes all day, which is a perfectly valid comedy job, but we didn't have a lot of, you know, slots to fill. And so what was really important was that everybody kind of had comedy and the ability to tell a story, and not, you know, and everybody was different levels of experience. Mm-hmm. But that was sort of important, was we didn't have enough space for people who were just like, I'm a punch up person. We didn't really have that room. We kind of needed everybody to come with sort of some substantial storytelling ability.
Jennica, could I, and Leah also too, I mean, in our pre-talk, one of the things that both of you had mentioned when you're talking about building a room, or also just everyone who surrounds themselves on the show, is this term hustle. It's a term that you both use quite a bit. And I think it's important for us to talk about, especially because hustle can sometimes have a negative connotation. That hustle means like kind of being a jerk overall. But I'd love to see how you can articulate that, you know, what you talk about in hustle, and how does hustle still work in a collaborative sense, or hustle still works in this, you know, very positive way. And what does that mean to you in terms of like, you know, and it seems that Jann seems to appreciate that quite a bit, and will champion people that she thinks are hustling.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah, definitely. When Jann has this saying, she says it a lot, that your character is your fate. And I think that's something we sort of like embrace in our room, that like if adult bully is your brand or your personality for some reason, you maybe need to reevaluate your life. Like that's not what we do. So you're right, that's a hustle can be negative. If you're saying I hustle because you're like actually a jerk to people, that's not the hustle we're talking about. We want people that champion other people. Jann is a huge believer in folks. She will not just be your ally, but she will kick the door down to get someone into a space that they have no, you know, prior access to. Those are the kind of people that, like, I know it's easy enough to say, go find those people in the world. I mean, that's kind of impossible, but do your best to find those people. And if you are the person that has the power to be people like that for other people, it's really important that you do it for them, because you can, I mean, it's not just about saying this person's really good, take a look at this person. It's more about like, this person's coming with me. Like if I'm doing this person is too. And that's kind of what I hope we've done in our room, because I know like a bunch of us had a bunch of firsts, like first ever half-hour episode written, or first ever TV credit. Like, so we kind of try to do that with the people in our room, is like promote them, which is great, and not make them like work at this, doing the same thing for a million years before they get an opportunity. Yeah. Jennica, any thoughts?
Yeah. I'll just to sort of add to some other parts of it. I think that I do think that hustling is very doable in a way that's like, you know, reasonable and rational, and not sort of I don't know. I don't know. I guess I think of hustle as somebody who's really committed. So in the writing perspective, that's like someone who's doing their best to become a better writer, who's you know, working at improving their writing samples, who is you know, trying stuff that they maybe were afraid to try, but they're going for it. All of that stuff I think is hustling. I think that when it comes time to actually sort of showing some hustle, when you're meeting people, you're meeting showrunners, maybe you're going through a program like the CFC or the Pacific Screenwriting Program, which is now the West Coast sort of answer to CFC. There are ways, I think, to stay connected with people and remind them who you are, and fill them in on what you're doing, and update them on the stuff that you're working on. And you can do that to stay fresh in people's minds. And then this happens to me quite a bit, that somebody will remind me that they're out there working really hard and they have a new, writing sample. And then I'll be like, oh, well, send it along. That happens fairly regularly. And I encourage it because sometimes being, top of mind is really useful. And then the other thing is, if you are in a position where you are maybe getting your first experience, like in a development room or in a writing room, I would say hustle really counts there. And here's how I feel about it. I think that if you're coming in, there's always ways that you can be helpful and useful, and you may not feel like your experience sort of exactly matches the people who are really senior, but there's somebody who needs help in the room. So whether that's, looking for the places that you could maybe help somebody and help fill a gap and help support another writer, which overall supports the whole team and the whole show, I think is the key. It's sort of, if you can offer to help give somebody a fresh set of eyes on a draft, or help break some sequence that somebody's having trouble with, or just talk something through, or be an idea factory, go away and be like, I'm going to research that thing we touched on briefly yesterday, and I come back in with some information that could be useful to a story. Those are the people that I think really shine in their first experiences, and people realize that this person is going to be so helpful to me. And so I really want them around. And that's what it is. I think it's both showing you want it and also genuinely contributing in any way that you can. So that's how I feel about hustle.
Cool. All right. So we're coming around to the half-hour mark here. And so I'm still going to ask a couple more questions, but I will say that for attendees, if you want to ask some questions, great. If you have the Q&A, start throwing some questions there. I see a couple of them there. So if you want to throw them in, and if you did, there's not a lot, I have more than enough questions that I can ask as we're moving on. So speaking of, you're talking about hustle, and also too, both of you have talked about how, you're giving people a lot of new opportunities for this particular show, which is great at the beginning, but also look at the end. Like, you're being renewed for a third season, you're on Hulu, you're getting accolades and you're winning awards. And so it's like, for a show that is giving people opportunities, or people might have a lot of experience coming in, that's a huge end result for talking about, I guess, maybe not having the most traditional way in. So I'd love to hear about, when you're building that room, how do you feel that things that when you were putting together that room and running that room, or in that writing room, that you're able to bring out the best in people without hopefully making them work super late, or getting them stressed out, or not hitting budgets, etc., etc. So what are some of the key things that you think that makes your writing room most conducive to comedy and quality?
Well, Jann's in it, so that's helpful. So she's always making us have a good time. But we don't make people stay until 10 p.m. to crank something out because that's the way you do it. We understand people have lives and children and spouses and all those things. The work-life balance is important to us. So Jenica's not the kind of person that's like, well, the sun's still up, so consider yourself working. Because we're all adults and, we want to do a good job. So it's not like we're like, I'm just going to leave now because I'm not about this. I just think our room is quite fun. Maybe because we're not grinding ourselves down to the ground. That could be something to do with it.
Yeah, I thought a little bit about this after we talked about this, Richard. So I think that, the question was sort of about, we joked about how I don't think people get funnier at 10 o'clock at night. Mm-hmm. If they were there at 10 a.m., I don't think that the 12-hour day or plus in a writing room is necessarily the most conducive to creativity and comedy. I think that there's two factors for me that I've really been thinking about. And one is preparation on the part of the showrunner or the creators. So in our case, when we start our writing room, Leah and Jann and I have actually spent some time already on what we want the big picture of the season to be. I feel like that's our job to figure that out, is to not sort of start from nothing and be like, what the heck should we do? Just to have that conversation and come in with sort of like a broad strokes idea of what we want the season to be. And that's mainly just where are we beginning, where might Jann end up, and sort of what's her journey for the season, and what are some of the themes of the season that we're exploring. And we go do that beforehand, so that we have something on paper that says that it could all change, but here is a place for us to begin, so that when we collect our brilliant writers together, we are, I think, making really good use of the time, because we're jumping into actually figuring out what those stories might be, as opposed to, I mean, look, this obviously this can be done all together as a group as well, but for our purposes, it has been really useful to contemplate between seasons, what might we like to do next season? Think about the broad strokes, think about the questions that were unanswered at the end of the season. What do we want? How do we want to answer those? And sort of make some decisions, so that when you come in, I think you can hit the ground running a bit more. So that, I found, has worked for kind of keeping our schedule, kind of sane. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing I think is something that I told you, like I just look at what other showrunners I saw and I had as leaders. I looked at what they did, and I try to like be inspired by the best of many of them, but what those individual qualities are. And one thing I've always respected is when a showrunner picks a path and goes down it. I think that it is very easy to trick yourself into, there's a right way to do something, and we have to find that before we can move forward. I think that you find a good path by moving. And so I like to be, some of it's intuitive, and we make mistakes, and sometimes we go down a path we don't like. And we have certainly had storylines we've thrown out or said, these two stories don't belong in the same episode at all. Now we learned that, great. But I do feel like if you can get moving and start breaking something, start fleshing something out, you are in a better position to clarify what you really want to do and keep moving forward and make progress. And I think that there can be a certain kind of person who is a bit gun shy about going down the wrong path. And so you can spend 6 hours not going down any path at all. And then it's 4 o'clock and you have to stay till midnight because nothing's been done yet. And that is what I hope I don't do. My goal is to not do that. And, when we're shooting, it is, of course, we have these long hours, but I feel like that's the part that's unavoidable. That's the part that is financially driven, because this industry is not in a position where we're going to start shooting 8-hour, film days. That's just not going to happen anytime soon. It's just, that's very financially, draining. So I think when it's necessary, like when it comes to production, it's generally Leah and I who are still keeping things going and doing the tweaks that are necessary for production changes. We work really long days, and that is what it is. You're giving your life to it. But I feel like when it's not that time, when it's the time for creating and imagining and just sort of blue skying it, I feel like I like to keep a, I don't know, more regular working hours kind of vibe at that point, because you can, because I don't know, because mental health and family is important. And that's just, that's just our jam.
And Jenica's also very good at creating a space that is safe to have ideas in, which is like the whole purpose of a room. So no one ever feels like they can't say something, even if they're like, this is going to be dumb. Like a lot of the time, Jennica starts with, this is the bad pitch, but. And
that's
the
tradition.
Worst pitches can jump off to other things that are like not terrible.
I like to model terrible ideas. And so everyone knows it's a safe place to do that. You can just say whatever you want.
Here's a garbage story idea. Anybody?
And I hate.
I think it's really interesting when you're talking about that, is that it's like yes anding, is that okay, at least you're getting something to jump off of. I think also, Jennica, you talked about this point about going down a path.
Yeah.
Tim Ferriss, who wrote the 4-Hour Workweek, if anyone likes that stuff, he has this saying that it's probably not his, but he talked about, instead of ready, aim, fire, ready, fire, aim. And that because it's never going to be perfect. But if you get paralysis of not actually stepping forward, it's going to take forever, as opposed to like, if you're good enough, then let's try commit down this direction and then see what can come from there, right?
I do believe that. I'm also somebody who feels you should not start drafting. I like to start outlining or breaking a story, outlining, just, get it moving and see if the juices are flowing and see if there's something there, as opposed to staring at anything blank. Can't stand a blank wall. Can't stand a blank page.
Girl loves a Post-it note. She loves them.
There we go.
I mean, come on. I'm sure most of the people on this list have that on one wall.
That's it. That's it. Okay, so I'm seeing some questions come on here, and then we'll jump into like so going from the shooting the first season here. But I see here, coming back to the pitches here, Leah. So Chris here has a question. He asked here, where did you pitch in Toronto, or any other tips for writing, looking for writers looking for a pathway or pitching a series in Canada? So regardless of where you pitched in Toronto, I don't think we need to actually answer, hey, here are the people who said no, or here's the people I passed on. But
What makes you think
overall,
everyone said no?
maybe not, maybe not. But how about in terms of this sort of thing, is that any other tips for writers? So and also too, Jennica, I open up to you, is that when you're trying to pitch for a series in Canada, like what are the ways to do? Like, sure, we can look up all the boat rockers, the various production companies, send an email out to them, be like, hey, you don't know me, but here's a pitch. Maybe that works, maybe that doesn't. What do you find are the best routes to getting to that idea? Which I'll also say, and it's me also phrasing it, as opposed to like, maybe not like, hey, here's my connection to talk to a big important person. Maybe here's someone I should talk to give me feedback to make sure that my pitch is great, so that I don't like screw, mess it up when I actually get to that big top person.
I think Jennica is probably better suited to answer this question, because I did approach Project 10 because of a recommendation. So like it was like, I kind of put feelers out there to the people that I knew that worked in Toronto, and they mentioned Project 10 and they had worked with them in the past. So like this person that I trusted them. So that's very helpful. And they took a meeting with me having no idea who I was. And we sat in a cafeteria and I slid across the table to this pitch with Jann. I think because Jann's name's on it, like that's a door opener. So I feel like Jennica, take it away from people.
Let me tell you about all the shows I've pitched that don't have a celebrity attached. So the question is sort of how you figure out who to approach and how you go about doing that. Well, one thing I would say in the case of Jann, I'm not going to speak for Leah. Just explained how that happened, but even if she had been researching just the kinds of shows that people make, Project 10 would have been a pretty good choice to go to. And even now, even a little more, they've developed some other shows for, vehicles for people. And so that actually was sort of investigatable and would have been not a bad way to go. I would say, so it's a whole process. I think that there is, certainly if you're represented, then your agent is somebody that you can lean on to ask those questions, that they can be your trusted person to say, who do you, I have this idea, who do you think I should go to? And the agents will, your agent will tell you, these are the places that might be interested. They've got a good track record. Here are some people I personally like as humans, so you might want to go to them. And that is obviously a different situation if you are represented. If you're not represented, I would say, I think that you sort of participate in your community, wherever you are, and including online. And so for me, I live in Vancouver, but this production company is a Toronto production company. My agent is in Toronto. And so I have over years gotten to know many of the Vancouver producers through a variety of means, going to panels, going to conventions, going out to events when they're happening. And through that, you can actually sort of make connections. And anybody you make a connection to, if you are polite and clear about what you're hoping to do, might be able to help pass you to someone else who also might be able to provide some information for you. So I would say that's probably the easiest way to go is to try to get to know people in your own community and sort of build that community. And then the other thing is a lot of production companies do allow, a kind of cold submission. They'll have a development executive who is accepting emails or phone calls, probably emails, in which you can say, hey, I've got an idea about this. Would you be interested in hearing more? Another thing you could do, and I don't want to speak for production companies and whether or not they have a lot of time for this, but another thing you could do is before you have that idea you want to pitch them explicitly, you could go and try to meet some of the producers and development execs in your community. So here in Vancouver, I could go to a couple of the producers and say, hey, I'm a writer. This is the kind of stuff I'm interested in. Would you have time for a coffee meeting, or right now, a Zoom meeting, to chat for 20 minutes about the kinds of shows that you guys are looking to do in the future? And then you can kind of develop a bit of a rapport with that person. And then when you have something that does seem like it might be right for them, you can go to them and they kind of already know you. I think that those are some of the tips that I would have. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, and it sounds like too, you're also talking about, it's like, it's not just your idea, but you also trying to form a relationship with these people. That it's like they're also investing in you as a writer, as opposed to as idea first as well. That's great. I have another question here from Henry. So Henry's asking, is Jann present in the room during the process, or is she invited in after you are at a particular stage of your work? I'm going to jump on board with this. I'm going to yes and this question. Is that especially because we're talking specifically about Jann, you know, not, like I said, not everyone has a celebrity that's going to be on their show.
Right.
But what people might have is they may be adapting IP and intellectual property.
Yes.
So I think just jumping off of what Henry's point is of when he comes in, is I'd like to hear if there's any sort of overall commentary. What's it like to adapt a living, breathing IP that still has an effect on the series? For some of the interesting, how do you integrate that or lean into that?
Well, Jann is in our writer's room. She's in it the whole time. We have a bit of a unique situation where, I mean, prior to COVID, we did a week of writer's room at her home, like on her acreage, where all the writers would go there for a week. So it was like an adult summer camp vibe, and she would just make dinner. I mean, she's the first to say I'm not a writer. So when she's in the room with us, she's 50% distraction. And she's
very entertaining distraction.
Yeah, very entertaining. Yeah. She's like, look at me, I got a sourdough starter. You know, like doing this whole thing over here, and we're like trying to write. But we love it. But she's super helpful because she will come up with she'll say, I once did a show and they paid me in chocolate. And that is how we got that storyline in the pilot where she sings for cheese at a farmer's market. So some of the stuff is just pulled from her real life. Like she'll just come up with random stuff and we'll expand that into the story. But she's definitely there the whole time. She's there with her dog in her sweatpants. Sometimes she's lying under the table. She's taking phone calls. Sometimes she's vacuuming like around us.
We wrote that in as well.
But she's helpful too.
I would say she is very funny. She pitches dialogue jokes all the time, and often we use them. I mean, we'll be talking about the scene and what the scene's going to be like, and she'll blurt something out in character, and we often just make that note. So a lot of times, funny stuff that she says goes onto a card, like it's from the very beginning. But one of the other ways that it's very helpful to have her in the room is the reverse of what we're talking about, which is if we were to not report, but I guess pitch to her at the end of the day, hey, here's what we did today. Here's the direction we're thinking. There is always that danger that we went down a path that she's not that keen on for whatever reason. And it is her literal name in the show, on the show, her face, her voice, her actual career we're pulling inspiration from. So, that matters. So I would say it is very useful that she is there and responding to things on the spot. Mm-hmm. So not only is she adding, she is, yes, also sometimes, wanders away to do something else, and that's hilarious. But it's also really, it's so important that that we have buy-in from her, that we're going down a path that she's excited about and that she's interested in and would feel comfortable doing. And so it would take a lot longer, I think, to sort of have those chats at the end of every day and then maybe backpedal on things. Mm-hmm. I think it just helps us streamline. It's like, at the end of the day, I know we're all on the same page.
Mm-hmm. It helps if from the beginning she's on board with running from the police.
Yes.
After crashing a vehicle into a field of cows. To have to go into a space afterwards and be like, here's what we're thinking. Yeah. Picture this, cattle. It would just be time consuming, and she might be like, what? But if she's there from the beginning and helping us with story, it's everyone knows what's up.
Yeah.
I think it's important, especially you're talking about how you also have the work-life balance, is that saying, coming back to this, have transparency, preparedness, and getting everyone on the same page. I'm assuming that also helps in regards to you can also have your balance because you're doing all that prep and openness overall.
Yeah.
Shauna here has a question here. What surprised you about this show in terms of stories or characters from pitch to production? Or what worked well that you were nervous about or didn't work well as you'd hoped? And we can also leverage this in terms of also talking about 2 seasons. So not just things like, the evolution of going to a second season. What are things that things that surprised you to decide to lean in, or what are things that you refined? I think we just talk just generally about changes from either pitch to shooting first season, then from first season to second season? Anything that you found interesting?
Well, I mean, I think maybe our biggest change for character-wise was that Kale initially was a dude.
A white guy.
Yeah. And then we had a phone interview with Nilu, our writer, and she was like, we didn't know her, but she was like, here's my idea of where you were not seeing clearly.
Yeah.
And she's like, Kale should definitely, absolutely not be a white dude. And we were like, yeah.
We're like, wow, that's so true.
And that actually, we definitely question in our room, like whenever we're coming up with new characters, like, have we seen this person a million times before? Like, does this need to be on TV again? Can we find space for something different that doesn't feel the same? We even if we love an idea, we will step back and ask the questions like, why are we doing this? Why is this woman reacting this way? Is it just like, because all women are hysterical? Or, we have that kind of conversation all the time. But in terms of character on paper from the beginning to now, Kale's probably the biggest change.
Yeah, I think so. And it was kind of nice to go from season 1 to season 2. And actually, Kale is a character that we've leaned into more. And just sort of, she was sort of, I think I called her something like a joyful robot or something in this season 1. And then in season 2, there's layers there. There's actual like conflict that she and Jann are having. And it was fun to sort of draw that out and let Kale have some dramatic moments too. And also vulnerable moments. And we're leaning even more into that in season 3. We're sort of going, into a whole other area for Kale's story. So that was really exciting. I think that one of the things that was a big surprise for me was we probably have maybe too many characters in our ensemble. And I'm telling you this flat out because our problem is we really like all of these characters. Mm-hmm. And considering the show is called Jann, we know that Jann is going to be our A story. Like, this is a show about this woman and her tensions. But around her, we've got so many family members, and we have both Kale and Todd on the industry side. And that has meant that sometimes we have really struggled to give some amazing performers some airtime. Mm-hmm. and to involve them in the stories. And that has been a surprising challenge to me. I think there's sort of a sweet spot for ensembles, and maybe it's like 6 or something. Mm-hmm. And we have pushed it to 8 or 9. And that is definitely something that I hope is useful information. If you're, when you're building your ensemble, just look for who's going to be, on the sidelines all the time because you just don't have the space.
I mean, at this point, we track them in a spreadsheet, like colors for characters to see where they come up in the episodes and across the season to make sure that like people are around.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of them. So it's hard to keep track.
Hey, cool. That's great in terms of talking, like, especially talking characters, how they change, and also matching the ensemble as well. Speaking about arcs and that sort of thing, Eric has a question here. Is one of the things you talk about when looking at the arc of the season where you want Jann to end up, do you look at the end of the series, like the overall big arc? Do you talk about how many seasons you want or hope for?
Such a good, hard question. So, yes, Eric. Hi, Eric. You found our problem.
Yes.
So we want the show to run for 11 seasons, obviously.
Christmas special and like some sort of movie.
Every year I pitch a Christmas special. I'm like, come on, the BBC model. Where's our Christmas special? Jann will sing. But our big problem is, I think that, our character is selfish and thinks of her primarily, sometimes very innocently in ways you can totally relate to, but does think of herself first, and constantly is kind of learning the lesson of like, right, I need to think of other people. And so we do have a kind of end game in mind. And this is, I'm not going to say specifically what we're thinking, but we are thinking that this character.
No, I'm just kidding.
What?
It ends up in outer space. Everyone's an alien. Spoiler alert.
Season 11. It is canon. We want to end at a place, I think, where she ultimately really just full-heartedly chooses like love, a kind of love, as opposed to she's thinking about, she's also distracted about sort of what's in it for her and like the selfish stuff. And but our challenge, of course, is we have to edge a little closer to that in a long arc without ever getting there, because the minute she's there, it's really hard to tell the stories from a comedic perspective that we're using right now. You know, it's like, we love that she goes in, bull in a china shop, like doesn't realize, you know, that she's wrecking things and doing stuff, you know, thinking of only of herself. The minute she starts to become more thoughtful and think of other people and sacrifice in really meaningful ways, when that becomes her instinct, I think the show is done. So we want to get there, but we want to know that that's our last season in a way. You know, I think we're going to be those people that really beg for, like, if you can't give us an end season, can we have that special so that we can, you know, have
and we
that.
we also really pay attention to the progression of Nora's illness as well, because we have an idea for all of that and how that should end, but we can't have her go there too quickly, or
yeah.
We're paying attention to all of that stuff.
The conversations for sure.
Well, coming north for this plan and stuff too, Adrian has a question here. So, I mean, this question you've answered to a bit, Leah, but let's expand it a bit more. So, he asks, how well baked was season 1 when you went pitching it, and was it outlined in the Bible? Now, Leah, you had talked about how when you were pitching it, and you even talked about Jennica, is that the pilot that you know got the green light for, it had a lot of changes. So I guess my question then is that if it had a lot of changes, maybe from the Bible, and so is that what are the key things that, I guess, not what are the key things, what are the things that when you made the first pitch that you think that project management said, like, okay, cool, maybe it's not all there, but this is what we really, or when it got the green light, what is it about the green light you thought people said, yep, this is going to change, but what we're seeing now, this thing we're loving that much. So hopefully that's the core, Leah, that you talked about the series, or maybe it was some other things about it that you felt that that Project 10 or CTV saw the potential in this particular series.
I'm trying to like remember. It feels like so long ago that I'm like, how did this start? Was I even there? Is this my life? I don't really. Where am I? Am I inside?
You may ask yourself.
I do know that we're not particularly precious about our ideas, because we are confident that there are more. Like, we get it. We want to hold on to things that are meaningful. That's fine. And there's a way to fight for stuff that you believe in that's really important. But like, if someone comes along and is like, you know, a Lamborghini, can it be a Tesla? Whatever. Like, we're not super precious about ideas at all. Like, we'll take notes from each other, because the goal is the best product we can make. But I feel like, I mean, initially it was just one page. I should go back and read it just to be like,
I think that, so I think that there were a couple of documents along the way. And I know Adrian's specific question was about how well baked was that Bible initially. And I believe that what we had at Greenlight, so we had the pilot script, and we had a Bible that had character descriptions and episode springboards and themes, talk about themes. It started with a premise page, characters, how they interact and come into conflict, themes, and certainly episode springboards, short paragraphs to show that there were like stories in this world. That I think that's where we were at with Greenlight. And then once we had Greenlight, I believe we actually revamped that in the time before we actually got going in our writer's room. We revamped that so that we knew it was 6 episodes, so we were able to actually speak to that, and we did a page on each episode idea. So when we started that first writer's room, we did have, it changed a lot, but we did have kind of a core of an idea about what we could explore and what would be fun and funny for each of those 6 episodes. And I think 1 or 2 of them may have been completely thrown out, but we did kind of come into the room with that. But that was not what got the green light. The green light was, we had the documentation of what the world was, and this pilot, and the pilot was like pretty close actually to what it was pretty representative of where we ended up going. And that's when so it was, I would say it was not that detailed. It was probably 12 to 15 pages with images of the characters.
Like full page images. No, I'm just kidding.
A lot of white space. I'm a big fan of white
tons
space.
Of pictures. It was just a bunch of pictures.
Again, I think that is that is partly based on, I don't think it was, underbaked, but I do think that it was a version that was also like, we were very aware that we were writing toward a vehicle for a person.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right, so we got about 5 to 10 minutes to wrap these things up. We got a couple more questions here, and then we'll just, because I know you two are quite busy and stuff. I see here, Jose. That's me just graciously giving you an out. That's really it. So Jose, one of the questions he asked here is that you mentioned the issue of numbers in comedy rooms, basically being that there's just not enough comedy rooms compared to how many fantastic comedy writers there are. What would you recommend writers keep in mind in order to make their work stand out? I'm going to yes and that question to be, what is it beyond a writer's amazing work when you actually interview them that makes you say, okay, it's not just the work they have to make. What is it that makes their written work stand out, and then what makes them stand out?
I'm going to respond to the written work one, because there was one thing that I noticed that I just thought I would share, because maybe like I didn't know this before reading a whole bunch of peers' comedy scripts. I would say the setting, like the world in which the show is set, made an impact. Like there were a lot of scripts we read that were very funny and had a really funny character at the heart of it, but there was also a little bit of a tendency towards a bit of a generic workplace. And that I completely understand, because what you want is to get to the characters and what's going on and what's funny for them. But it did sort of make those blend in a little bit more. And the scripts where there was a world or a setting that was really like different from what other people were, there was more specificity to it. Those really stood out for me. So that's a very nitty gritty thing I thought I would just throw out there, because maybe that'll be useful to them.
No, that I think just talking about specificity, I mean, would you all say like, it also sounds also like authenticity, like you're looking for a voice of like, this is interesting, even in terms of just remembering, the multitude of scripts that you're reading.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think that everybody needs to write the story that is their life, but I also do think that drawing from things you really know about just grounds it that much more. It just makes it feel so much more specific and authentic and real. So you can tell when somebody is drawing from like a job they've had, or a family dynamic they've had that's a little unusual or whatever. You can tell because they're able to sort of unpack these things that the average person might not have thought of. So I think that that's worth considering when you're developing an original pilot that's going to be used as a sample as well.
I mean, when I'm writing to our characters, when we're developing our characters, for example, the Dave character, that's the brother-in-law, Jann's brother-in-law, it's very much based off of my best friend's husband, who is like, he wears rubber gloves when he washes the dishes because he's got sensitive skin. He's got psoriasis. So like, these are the things I pay attention to in people when I'm like, what is it that I like about this person that I'm finding really hilarious? Or what is it that's rubbing me the wrong way about this? Why do I not want to know this person? And I try to like figure out how to write that into our characters, that they feel really like real people. Like that guy's always mopping the floor. So I was like, Jay, wait for it. Like this next week, Dave is very much doing you. Like I just pull from like real people and how they interact with each other and their kids and their wives and stuff. I'm basically saying that I analyze people like a robot.
Watch your back.
Steal from those people and immediately write it on a page and then present it.
Cool. All right, we're going to get a last question here before I you two here. Emily here, and sorry we're getting a lot of listed questions here. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to have time to go through them all. But Emily asks, Leah specifically, what is your advice for those of us out there looking for our own Jennica?
So great. Ooh, you're gonna have to figure out how to offer her a great job. We pay her to hang out with us. Like, I don't know. That's a great question. I don't know. I only met you because Project 10 was very helpful. I mean, it goes back to Jennica saying she went to Banff that year and took the meeting with Ben. Like it all came from Jennica doing the work, doing the thing to be in the community of writers, to be known and have them know her name. So she went and met with Ben, who absolutely remembered her because here's the thing about her. She's consistently herself. Like she is like always trying to be the best person she can be. People remember that. Like, so Ben remembered meeting her. So then obviously her name comes up and she's passed on to me. And then I meet her and she's as good as he remembered her. So like, be consistent.
Be consistent.
Great. Great. That's it. Good old reliable. Is there anything else you have to say? That's a great note. Any sort of last minute advice, some last shot before you take on off to these fantastic audience members here?
I don't know if any of, like, has any of this been helpful? I'm not sure. I'm going to go away now and be like.
We can talk about that later, Leah. Don't worry. We'll debrief.
In terms of you talking about how to work with IP, in terms of like how do you structure a room, how do you do the planning, the jumping in, doing commitment, figuring out what your idea is going to be and sticking with it. These have all been fantastic stuff. So Leah, you don't know. This has been it's been a great seminar, at least for me. And honestly, I'm the only face you see, so who cares? But no parting words. Jennica, any parting words for you?
We're done here.
No. I guess I would say just, if you can convince yourself to put yourself out there and go for it, to sort of like, I think there's never been a better time to think, to sort of just shoot your shot, like there's so many opportunities that are not necessarily as conventional as they used to be, but there's many opportunities out there. And I think that, reminding people, you're out there and what you want to do and you're passionate about it and letting that passion show. I do want to credit on Twitter, Ryan Knight, the screenwriter and poet Ryan Knighton, said something recently that I thought was so brilliant. He said, when you're pitching, you have to actually show the passion and confidence in yourself and this project, because partly what people are looking for is that somebody believes it's going to work. And so I thought that was really brilliant. So I thought I would pass that along, just trim somebody else's great BOMOs.
Maybe that's also my parting words.
Right.
Find the person. If you're not believing in yourself yet, find that person that believes in you, that will give you that you can like suck that courage from. And also, even though you haven't done something before, it doesn't mean you can't do it. I feel like you should.
That's true. Absolutely. Jump.
Don't let it stop you.
Pick the path. Go down the path. Yes.
Yes.
There we go. Great. Okay, so my official outro that I have to give here is one, just actually the additional things that, as you can see, that both Jennica and Leah have put up their social media handles, so you can make sure to follow them up, get them all the likes, etc., etc. They're writing their names there. On top of that, you've been watching Writers Talking TV, presented by the Writers Guild of Canada, and as well, this actual episode right here, we're recording it. You can find it on Writers Guild of Canada's YouTube channel, which is at youtube.com/user/Writers Guild of Canada. So thank you so much, Leah. Thank you so much, Jennica.